If you're interested in what I look like in real life and want to learn more about me, then follow my Instagram page at Joe the Insomniac. It started when a buddy of mine that I go to college with, Matt, and I decided to skip a day of class and take a weekend trip up Penn, Aurichalil country to get some late fall dirt biking in before it snowed and before the season was officially over. We had gotten some riding done in the area before, but instead of going to our usual romping grounds, we opted to shoot for a lesser known trail that a friend had told us about. So early Tuesday morning, we loaded up our bikes into the truck. We printed out a map of the area that showed all of the login roads and the few official dirt bike trails that are in the area. Traffic was really light, so we arrived at the spot we were planning on parking the truck at, which meant we had plenty of daylight to get out and ride in. Though we both have headlights on our bikes and had agreed that a little bit of darkness wouldn't be allowed to put a damper on the fun. After we unloaded and we locked up the truck, rode down the highway on the shoulder for about half a mile, then turned off onto the login road. This was an awesome trail. It was a 10-ish mile ride down this old login road to get to the trailhead, and we're probably a little over halfway there when, from behind us, we hear a loud engine. This beater of a truck flies past us, nearly hitting Matt and then disappearing around the next turn, just as quickly as he appeared. It's not like Matt and I were going slow. We aren't pro riders, but we're not bad. The last time I checked my tack, we were doing 37, pretty fast for an abandoned loggers road. After this, Matt stopped and killed his engine. Did you see that, dude? He nearly killed me. We decided that, while we're already stopped, we should take a quick break, drink some water, then get back after it. After the break, we did that. We found the trailhead and were loving it. The views were nice. The trail was technical without being unfun. The ground was wet but not soggy. And there were tons of additional trails that had been marked by other riders. Eventually we would come across two separate offshore trails, one going up the hill where we were facing and the other one going down to the right. Both were marked with ends at such and creek, signs that had been made out of plywood and spray painted and propped against trees. After consulting the map, we concluded that they probably did, one trail that went over the hill and the other one more or less going down the side into a small valley. I wanted to go low, but Matt wanted to go high, so we split up and decided to meet at the creek. My ride was nice for the most part, though it became very gravelly and steep at times, and I reached the bottom of the little valley, and as soon as I could see an open clearing at the end of the tunnels I was in. As I rode up, I could hear what I thought to be Matt's engine, but when I pulled out of the trees into the clearing by the creek, I saw that it wasn't a dirt bike. I had been hearing a powered generator. This was powering what looked like an old stove, and sat under the overhang at the windowless shack made out of plywood. Next to the makeshift house was the truck that we had seen earlier. I kill my engine, not wanting whoever's inside to be able to hear me, and move in closer. I didn't get too close, but even from where I stood, probably 50 yards away or more, I could smell something. I could see there was a big soup pot on the stove which was boiling, and I could only assume it was bleach, judging by the containers that were strewed around the place. That's when I saw a guy come running out from behind the shack, shotgun in hand, screaming, "What are you doing?" It's at that moment that I hear Matt's bike roar into life, and immediately I saw him tearing out of the tree line behind the shack. He saw me. As he rode towards me at full tilt, I hear him screaming at the top of his lungs, "Let's get out of here, he's got a shotgun." Luckily, my bike starts on the first kick, and I'm able to turn the bike around and tear out of there. I didn't even think about going so quick through that steep gradient before, but I didn't have a choice. We got back to the truck in a little under an hour, and immediately realised that ours was no longer the only one in the parking lot. The piece of junk pickup actually beat us there. He must have had a shortcut or something. He's now staring at us. Hoping that he wouldn't approach us, since we're right off a decently populated highway, we quickly loaded our stuff and left. But he followed, and it was more than an hour before we were able to lose him. The local police were called, but pretty much told us that they couldn't do anything about it. Needless to say, we didn't go riding around there anytime soon. What I really want to know is, why was he boiling bleach? What was he planning to do with it? I was in a small forest by my home one night at around 1 AM on a winter night. The reason for this was because I was practicing meditation, and I sometimes like to go out into nature during the seasons. I sat under a tree. The place was deserted when I got there, and I just calmly melted into the environment. I managed to get into a pretty deep state, so everything was sort of dreamlike. About halfway in, these two young women, likely teenagers, come in. They were getting drunk and high, and getting tipsy. They sat down about 20 feet away from me chatting, totally unaware of my presence. Now suddenly one of them notices me. They sit up and scream. "Did you see that?" she said to her friend. Then the other one realizes me too, and she screams as well. I said in a very monotone voice, "Don't worry, I'm a human woman." I was in a particularly deep state of mind at the time, so I didn't really think about how it sounded until afterwards. One of them responded, kind of stuttering, asking what I was doing. I said I was meditating, and that they didn't need to worry about me, that they can just proceed with drinking. They nervously laughed about it, then took off. To be honest, I don't blame them. This happened this September, around 11:30 PM. I was walking across my university campus in a parking lot next to the Life Sciences building. I'm happy and calm, on my way to visit my boyfriend. I got to a part of the parking lot that kind of ends and turns to a wooded area. It's nothing more than a thin strip of land that doesn't cut down during construction of the campus. It separates the parking lot from the Life Sciences Centre, which is a big concrete building, an example of brutalist architecture from a few decades ago. In this mini forest, as I always think of it, I notice a girl out of the corner of my eye. At first glance, I thought she's a rock, but I was quickly surprised to see that it's a girl casually sitting amid the trees. Now, naturally I was a little freaked out. It's almost midnight. The campus was usually quiet for a weekend, and the little wooded area had always given me chills. The light from the lamps in the parking lot just don't separate very far or penetrate deep into the woods. There's lots of places that someone can hide, is what I'm trying to say. I just look at her, trying to figure out if she's hurt or something. But not long after, I creep myself out. I couldn't see her very well in the darkness, but she had a vacant and almost sincere expression. I remember that, like she was in a deep thought. She didn't look at me. She had this black hair that went across to her shoulders. All things considered, looking desperately random sitting there late at night, she looked a little reasonably normal. I turned my head and pretended that she wasn't there as I walk out of the parking lot and along a path that led to the outside of the wooded area to another campus. Now this is kind of hard to explain, but the path leads up away from the wooded area to a well-lit alley between the concrete walls of life, which is kind of creepy. Once I got to the top, I will be out of sight. I let curiosity get the better of me and take one last look to the girl. My heart did that clenching thing. My palms were sweaty. Of course, I was expecting her to be sitting right there. No. At first I didn't even think she was there. I look around me. No one's there. It was only when my eyes really focused into the woods that I realized where she was. She's lying face down in the prone position on the grass, in the trees. What the heck? So of course now I'm starting to get scared. As I stare, I can see that she's lying perfectly straight. Her head is pointing down, more or less smashed into the floor below. I stared at her for a little bit, thinking she might turn her head to check if I'm still there or something. But she didn't move a muscle, not a twitch. It almost looked as though she is all tensed up, as if she's trying to avoid being seen, or getting ready to sprint. I had seen enough. I was ready to get the hell out of there, run walking into the alley, and shaking like a leaf the rest of my way to my boyfriend's place. I was trying to figure out what I'd just seen. I mean, you don't see this every day. I tried to rationalize it as a prank or something, but the more I think of it, the less sense it makes. This happened to me back when I was in high school, about 5 years ago. I was in my senior year, classes were winding down, and the teachers were finding less to talk about, and we were far more excited to get out of there. This one teacher I had was super quirky, kind of weird but cool, as he always had some interesting experiences to share. He and my group of friends in the class become acquainted. Among the other students who wouldn't listen to him when he attempted to speak about his past experiences. One day, he brought up this oasis, as he called it, a place in the woods that he would visit when he was young. It was a clearing deep within the trees, complete with dunes and a small beach, not too far from where we were going to school. Well, of course we didn't believe him, so he showed us on Google Maps. Our naive selves thought that after school we should attempt to go there, entering from a backyard closet to the clearing. We should have known that the 40-something years later layout of the place would have changed. Come to the end of the day, I gather up 3 of my closest friends. We all agree upon using Google Maps as our GPS. After convincing one of our mums to drop us off within the light of hanging at a friend's place, we made our way to the edge of the forest. God, I wish we called it quits back then. We started out alright, I guess, making our way closer by climbing through hordes of bushes and weeds. It was probably the most run down, gross, dumped on parts of a forest that I'd ever been in, with broken car parts everywhere. Eventually, as we got closer to the supposed clearing, we hear a dog viciously barking in the distance. My alarms went off. That was a dog in the middle of the damn woods. It was fairly residential, so no hunting, but also no trails or any reason to be out there. My friends were a mix of angry at me for suggesting this, and extremely anxious about how we're going to get through. By this point, we just wanted to make it to the sandy beach parts of the woods, which seemed so much closer judging by our distance on the maps. The closer we got, the louder the barking became. At this point, we weren't saying much to each other as I led. We were literally up the creek with nowhere to go. The barking seemed like it was coming from everywhere. I could see a dirt clearing ahead, so I just told everyone to make a break for it. At least in the open, we could see what was coming at us. This was not the clearing that we were hoping for, and I could not find it on the map after. Now off in the distance, there was a medium-sized makeshift building. It appeared to be made out of plywood painted grey and black. Above the door hung a giant animal skull with horns. I felt a pit in my stomach, as I knew this was not good. I realised that this is the source of the barking, being at its loudest. I was frozen, unsure what to do. I came back to my senses when I hear a deep and angry voice shouting, "Hey, what are you doing?" from somewhere by the building. I'd officially had enough of the situation. I gotten all my friends in this mess too, so I felt responsible. I told everybody just to bite the bullet and run blind through the woods. It could have been my mind playing tricks on me, but I swear it felt like the dog was chasing us, as though somebody let it loose. After kicking through the dense wilderness and trees, we were so scraped up and bloody that by the time we got far enough away that we felt safe, we were crying. I called my mum and told her in the mess that we were in what happened. I gave her the street closest to the woods that we're on, and she gladly picked us up. She saw us on the side of the road, and said it looked as though we'd went through hell and back. After that day, we barely spoke about it again. We didn't even tell the teacher what had happened, in fear of somehow getting into trouble. I just want to know who the hell was in that creepy hut with skulls on it, and what did they want from us? It's a Tuesday night at the office depot where I work. A customer comes in needing to fax some things at 7 PM. He said he remembered me from the last time that he was there to fax. Probably. I don't remember you, but your voice is kind of familiar, I said. And I'll skip to about 10 minutes later, when his confirmation page finally comes in. I'm ringing him up, and without any context, he says to me, "Do you know how to get rid of a dead body?" I replied nervously, "No, well, I do watch a lot of TV, so he interrupts me with, "This is how you get rid of a body. You deep freeze the body, get a wood chipper, you back up into a lake or river and chip the body away. The flesh eats away from the body. You then take the wood chipper to a car wash and wash it out." While saying this, he's not smiling or laughing. He just tells me it very calmly, with a particular tone, as though he's giving me instructions on how to change a light bulb. It may not seem like a big deal, but I'm totally into true crime and reading up on serial killers. But this time, I'm not reading. This man's giving me a completely blank stare, telling me how to effectively get rid of a body with no context whatsoever. I never saw him again. In the year 2000, I was living in England, my home country. I just turned 23 and went through a difficult breakup, losing my home. Needless to say, I was pretty depressed, mopping around my parents' home for a few months while working in a dead-end job. One of my older colleagues would always ask me what I'd done the previous weekend, and it's usually nothing. He told me that he'd gone wild camping from Friday through Sunday in a forest area north of my town. The way he told the story of camping under the stars, building a fire, getting away from it all, really seemed to be something I needed. I always loved camping as a young child and a teenager, but I'd always been accompanied by friends or family. The prospect of camping alone filled me with intrigue and excitement for the first time in months. I said to him to specify the equipment I would need, and we set off to the camping outdoor store. My weekend was filled with planning where I'd go. I bought ordnance survey maps which allowed me to identify interesting places that my colleague had mentioned, and to find the easiest way there by public transport. On the Friday, I brought the minimal amount of camping equipment with me to work, leaving a few hours early. I packed up my stuff, heading to the bus stop to take the bus which would lead me to the closest possible location where I intended to camp. Now I can remember quite vividly the feeling of calm as the bus trotted along a small country lane. The golden light of the evening streamed in through the windows. Feeling of warmth gone all across my face. I felt happy, excited, and alive. The depression that I'd been feeling had dissipated. In my stop, I hopped off the bus, pulling out my map and compass, making my way towards my intended destination. The walk took me approximately 1.5 hours to find the area where I was meant to be camping. It looked a bit too open for my liking, so I continued onwards for another 10 or 15 minutes, until I found a place that was more enclosed. The late afternoon and evening was uneventful. I pitched a tent, cooked some food I brought with me on a little gas stove. I laid on the grass and enjoyed the peace and quiet. I remembered feeling sleepy as it got to around 10 PM, so I climbed into my bed and read by the torchlight. Around 4 hours later, at about 2 AM, I was awoken from my deep sleep by a noise in the distance, directly behind my head. I felt disorientated, unaware of where I was or even what the noise is. I remembered thinking, why is he crying again? Half asleep, thinking it's my little brother. Then I bolted upright, a shock of remembering where I was. With the adrenaline pumping, I could hear my own pulse. I strained to try and figure out what the noise was in the distance. It was on and off, changing in duration, intensity and volume. I told myself that it must be an animal. This reduces the anxiety somewhat. I lay back down, checked my watch. It's 2:15 AM. Now, try as I would, I could not fall asleep again. I must have been laying there for 10 minutes when, out of nowhere, the sound begins again, closer, louder and weirder. I felt the hairs on the back of my neck stand up. This time, it sounded like crying and hyperventilation. It continued for a few minutes and suddenly stopped. I started to wonder perhaps a walker got lost in the woods and become distraught. I began to hear a sort of banging sound, like someone hitting a tree with a blunt metal object. Just once at first. Then it became continuous and intense, as though somebody wanted to knock a tree down with a metal bat. The noise comes to a stop, and so too does my breathing. I held my breath, my heart beating furiously. I suddenly feel really exposed, the flimsy tent giving me no security. I'm starting to calm myself down. I hear a blood-curdling scream echoing through the woods and the clearing. I sit bolt upright. My instinct is telling me to rip the tent open and just run in the opposite direction to where the sound originates. However, I'm able to stop myself from acting so rashly. The scream was definitely of a man. Reflecting on the sound, the only way I can describe it is as though it's full of anger, disgust, agony, and hopelessness, like somebody in despair. I hear some murmuring, like blabbling coming from my east. Again, another scream, then a man shouts, "Why? Why, Greg?" This is accompanied by intense crying, along with what sounds like nonsensical babbling. I can only make out a few words, which, from my memory, were fire, soil, and sky. It sounds like a catchy song. I can hear this now clearly. It'd be a really bad song to be fair though. This means a few things. I knew that they're moving towards a deeper part of the forest, but also, they may come across my tent. I hear again, "Why, Greg? Why did you do it? For God's sake, Greg." I then heard babbling getting louder. At first, I thought they were just talking louder, but then heard the breaking of twigs underneath my feet. It sounded like the person was stumbling, sometimes falling to their knees, hitting the ground with something and getting up again. At this point, I was crouched in my tent. My senses strained to hear what the hell was going on. Then it kind of stops. I didn't hear any footsteps, babbling, screaming, or anything. Like the man had just evaporated. I remember checking my watch. It's 3 AM. After a few minutes, I unzipped the tent in the most noiseless way possible and slipped out. I crouched on the grass beside the tent, silently surveying the area where the noise come from. While still in the dark, the moon gave me some shine on the area. I see nothing. There was noises, but only animal sounds. I think that I crouched there for maybe 10 minutes just staring. Now, having seen nothing, I thought maybe it was over, and I tried to process the whole thing. The weird thing was that, after some time, I felt very peaceful. I must have fallen asleep again at some point, as the next thing I knew, the sun was up, and stretching through the tent. I get up hurriedly, shoving my stuff in my backpack, getting ready to go home. I tried to make my way back to the bus stop. As soon as I look around for any signs of someone having been there during the night, in my peripheral vision, I notice what appears to be a black bag on top of the bushes. Despite my experience, my curiosity gets the better of me. I go check it out. It was not a bag, but an old leather bomber jacket, in really bad condition. I'm not sure if it had been there before. I didn't think it had been. I didn't want to touch it. I picked up a stick and flicked it over. I was shocked to see what appeared to be a large mallet. After seeing that, I wanted to go. I ran through the woods back to the bus stop. After reaching my town, I went to the police just to inform them of what had happened. It's been so many years since, but I remember it all as though it was yesterday. I cannot imagine why anybody would have been walking through a forest that was so remote at 3 in the morning. The whole thing was so weird. It's the craziest thing that's ever happened to me. This happened back in 2012, when I was 15. There was a youth centre in my city that used to do annual camping trips to Sweden. Me and 2 of my friends, Sarah and Michelle, decided to go. The campground was set with an office and kiosk at the entrance, and all of the caravans and tents were behind it. In front of the office was a giant parking lot that you would have to cross to get to showers and bathrooms. The office was located in one corner, and the bathrooms in the opposite further away. There were 3 male teachers with us on the trip. Every day, they would take us to the supermarket nearby, in case we wanted something that the kiosk didn't sell. While we were in line to pay, we noticed a guy, probably in his early 20s. He dressed in black cargo pants, big leather boots, and a leather jacket, despite it being over 30 degrees outside. But the most notable thing about him was his hair, or lack of. He had no hair, no eyebrows or eyelashes. He looked as though he'd gone through chemotherapy. We felt bad for him because he was so young. We talked about him on our way back. When we got back, we hung out a bit just chilling in the lake, before we went to the kiosk to buy something to drink. We saw him again. We thought it was coincidence, even though there weren't that many people on the campsite. He could have been living there. Later that afternoon, Sarah had to use a bathroom, and because it was a fair way away and slightly deserted, me and Michelle went with her. There was a bench and a table just outside of the cabins that held the bathrooms. Guess who was there? The same guy from earlier. He was sitting there with 3 friends, 2 girls and a guy. And when the guy got close, he stood up. He looked like he wanted to say something. Sarah and Michelle, who had always been a bit paranoid, speeded up and went into the bathroom, but I hung back a bit, asking if he wanted anything. He looked after my friends and started shaking his head no, and sat back down. I kind of stood there for a couple of seconds, because he appeared sad. Me and Michelle sat there in the changing room, adjacent to the bathroom. After a couple of minutes, one of the girls comes from outside, started speaking in Swedish. Even though the Scandinavian language is similar to each other, it can still be hard to understand. So we spend the next couple of minutes explaining that we're not Swedish, before she started speaking broken English. She told us that her friend, the bald guy, was very shy, and if we just wanted to speak to him for a couple of minutes. And now, with 3 girls in a foreign country, he was at least a couple of years older than us. We didn't want to speak to him. We tell her this. She was talking with us for more than 20 minutes. In the beginning, she just wanted us to speak to him. Then she wanted us to go to his tent with him. Then she asked us to sleep with him. At this point, she was very frantic and kept switching from Swedish to English. She said, "You just need to sleep with him. Can you do that for me?" At this point, Sarah was finally done in the bathroom and come out to see what was happening. The girl looked as though she's about to cry and left the room. Sarah wanted to see who it was. So we all looked out of the little window, and I'm so glad we did. We saw the girl say something to the guy. He looked over to the bathroom door, slammed his fist onto the table, got up, and walked over to the door. We didn't know what to do. He was blocking the only exit now. So we all went into the little bathroom, locked the door. We then hear him knocking on the door to the changing room. We hold our breaths. After a while he knocks again, but we still kept quiet, not even moving. After a while, we heard the door open, but he was clearly trying to be as quiet as possible. He slowly walked towards the bathroom door, and all we could hear was a heavy sound of his boots on the floor. He sat down just outside of the door. For 45 minutes, we could hear his breathing outside of the door. For those 45 minutes, we didn't care how much noise we made. He already knew we were there. We tried to find the number for the Swedish police, but we didn't have any service on our phones. Because we're in a different country, we didn't have our teachers' numbers, so we couldn't call them. We just sat there panicking for the most part. Suddenly, he gets up, kicks a door, and walks out again. We were dead quiet and didn't move for another 10 minutes, scared that he's trying to lure us out. All of a sudden, the door opens again. We could hear someone fumbling with something, either keys or tools. We were afraid that he had something to open the door with, but remembered that this tiny little box that you'd put money in to get the showers started. We said, "Who was it?" Someone reported that they're the janitor. I was in shock, so didn't listen. We took a chance and slowly opened the door, ready to slam it shut. The man on the other side wasn't the same guy though. He's at least 60. We asked him again if he saw the other guy. He told us that he told him that he had to leave, as he saw him by our changing room. We thanked the man, starting towards the office. When we met the owner, she quickly got our teachers there. We were all very shocked. It's hard to get words out, but we were able to tell the teachers what had happened. All the teachers are so outraged. 2 of them left immediately to find the guy. That night, the police came to talk with us and told us that sleep with is Swedish for the same thing as English. The police never found the guy. This happened about 6 years ago. if I remember the year correctly. It was time for my first ever overnight stay at a summer camp. I was pretty excited. This particular camp had a system where it normally functioned as a day camp, but there was one night each week where kids would stay overnight. I was a socially awkward kid, so I avoided these overnight stays as much as possible. But this one time, I decided to be brave, have some fun, and try it myself. Only after did I regret it. So before I explain what happened, I'll briefly give you an outline of the camp. It was situated near the shore of an isolated lake, which had very few houses on it. My camping ground decided to take advantage of that and agreed to set up a few feet from the shore, in a small clearing located near a small path. Much of the shoreline was walled off by low-lying underbush, including the area we're in. So flash forward to night time. We've set up our tents and sleeping bags. We've eaten our s'mores, and we've just set up our sleeping arrangements. I'm in the large tent with 3 others, sitting a few feet from the path that ran through the clearing. We're whispering amongst ourselves, talking about the best camp activities, the nicest counsellors, usual camping stuff. We're just about to say our goodnights when we hear the faint hum of a motor coming from the lake. It's unusual for people to be out late at night on a motorboat on a small and isolated lake. We initially blow it off as somebody fishing. However, the noise grows louder. I begin to hear what sounds like drunk people cackling. At first, this isn't scary for me. I assume it's just drunk people having some late night summer fun. My tent mates agree. We try ignore it, but we start to getting nervous when we hear cackling and chatter. It's getting quieter now. I hear the engine shut off. It sounded like people were quietly disembarking at the camp's fishing dock, which is a few hundred feet away. For a couple of minutes, I hear total silence. We're terrified. 2 of my tent mates are completely still, while the other is fidgeting and shaking. Now looking back on it, the place itself shouldn't have been scary, but something felt distinctly off about the whole situation. My gut instincts were right. I start hearing slow, methodical footsteps, creepily slow along the path. It's clear this intruder is intent on being as quiet as possible, but it's easy to hear when somebody's walking in a forest full of sticks. I'm listening to their steps as they approach our campsite at a painfully slow pace, when suddenly they stop and grunt. At this point, it's clear that 1, it's a man, 2, the person should not be here, and 3, someone was watching us when we set up the campsite. There was no way he could have known where we were without watching us. The man stands for what feels like an eternity before he begins to move again, but the sounds I hear terrify me. He's moving towards our tent. All my tent mates are laying completely still, mortified, not moving a muscle. He approaches our tent, walking right up on it so that we can see the silhouette of his legs outlined by a faint moonlight. He stands for another few seconds, then places his finger on the tent. He drags it across, beginning to walk. The man traces the entire perimeter of the tent with 1 finger. He holds it there for a few seconds after, grunts again, slowly walks to another tent. My tent mates are terrified. We're all looking at each other now like a deer in headlights. We hear him move from tent to tent, walking around each one, with each trace feeling like it took longer than the last. Finally, he walks slowly back to the path, grunts once more, and walks away quickly in the direction that he come from. A few minutes later, I hear the motor on the boat starting up again, before it slowly fades away into the distance. The counsellor who was asleep during the ordeal was convinced that we were faking it, trying to prank them. Those of us who reported it were ignored. That's the part that I'm still angry about to this day. Why on earth did they come over here too? That part gets to me. How long had they been scouting us, and what were they doing? What did they want from us? 3 years ago, my girlfriend and I had decided to hike up near her parents' place in Oregon when we went to visit them for 1 week. We decided to bring our camping gear with us and stay the night. I had only been camping once before, and it was in the Boy Scouts, so it had been a long time. My girlfriend grew up camping and knows her way around that area very well, so myself, her, and her parents' dog Bear, a huge Newfoundland lab mix, head up the trail. Now we actually saw a few people out there. They're mostly just day hikers. People love Bear and stop to pet him. So a little after 6, we make camp, set up our tent, pull out our grub. We decided to get some sandwiches, stuff for s'nores, chips, and some beer. I lit up a joint and she pulled out her guitar after we finished eating. Great relaxing night. We started winding down, ready to head to bed. She was in the tent getting dressed for bed when I finished a joint and made sure the fire was out. Suddenly, Bear growls, this low menacing growl. I've never heard him do it before. I pet him and look around to try and figure out what's going on. We get to sleep at around 1. I wake up to my girlfriend shaking me, looking terrified. I then hear Bear begin to growl besides us. She holds up her finger, talking low. She tells me that she woke up to voices. I listen and hear what sounds like 2 men talking. Then, we hear something absolutely terrifying. One of them says to his friend, "I'll take the girl, you get rid of the guy." At this point, I knew we're screwed. We have no weapons of any kind. My girlfriend unzips the tent, and Bear rockets out. I've never seen him move so fast in my life. I hear one of the guys yell out. I hear Bear snarling and growling, and I hear them running. My girlfriend takes a satellite phone out. We then call her dad, and he calls law enforcement, and we stay in the tent as instructed. Bear comes back out of breath. No sign of the guys. We're now waiting for the ranger. When they eventually arrive, they find no sign of the guys, no truck tires, anything. They then give us a ride back down to our car. And later that day, we got Bear a big steak. Lord knows what them people wanted to do with us. I'm just glad that we had Bear with us and didn't have to find out. But this was one of those memories that I just wanted to share. Back in 2007, I started a tech job with an IP, phone, VoIP, DT1 long distance company. The company is no longer around, and honestly, I don't know how they stayed in business as long as they did. It was really a scam, but thankfully, I was on the IT side of things, so I didn't have to sell anything. It was a small tech support call center. The customer would call in for Verizon, etc., and say DT1 lines were down, or they're suffering outages. I was the only female on my team, having to prove myself and show that I could do anything my male counterparts could. Now it didn't take long, and customers actually respected me for being able to handle things. After making my mark, I decided to take the 10-hour night shifts. I worked from Wednesday to Saturday, 1 PM to 12 AM, and after 6 PM, I was completely alone in the whole building. The rush to get out of the office by 6 PM was insane. I couldn't blame them, but I decided having 3 days off was better than 2. Like I said, I was by myself most of the night. I would have to keep an eye out on emails and make sure I answered calls. It was a very slow shift. I would get a lot of video game / reading or work done during this time. But sometimes, I would just wander around the building, or call around to get away from my desk. I would have the VoIP phone system connected to my cell phone, so no calls were ever missed. This allowed me to grab a soda, go get food and so on. One time while I was away from my desk, I was going down to the lunchroom to grab a soda. The vending machine was on the basement floor. The basement had a wall of windows and one set of security doors. Same for the main entrance. Only there was a camera facing that door. Nothing else really made you feel very safe there. Now I really didn't like going into the basement much, because the lack of building faced an acre of woods. They're very dark. There was a walking path to the woods, but for some reason, they didn't install lights on the path. No one was ever really sure why that was, but it didn't help the creepy factor. Sometimes, I would see animals run past, but others, I felt as though somebody was watching me. I always tried my best to make it fast when getting a soda or snack, but often, it wasn't enough. So one night, I was making my way down to the basement of the building to get a soda. It was a slow dragging night, and needed a little caffeine to pick me up. I counted my money as I walked to make sure I had enough to get in and out quick. But out of the corner of my eye, I saw something dart from the glass back into the darkness. I stopped dead in my tracks, tried to scan the forest, but, like I said, it was just blackness. I felt a bit uneasy, and everything told me to turn on my heels and go back to the desk. But it's 9 PM. I had a fair bit of time left on my shift before I could blow this pop stand. I tried shaking my feelings off, briskly walking over to the soda machine. I made my selection. The soda dropped as I bent down to get it. I then heard a loud pinging sound. It was as though somebody hit the glass with something. I stand straight up, feeling the hair on the back of my neck standing. I slowly turn around, and was scared to see somebody out there. But as I made the full turn, I saw once again nothing but darkness. I thought this was a good time to book it back up the main floor. I didn't bother with the elevator. I went to the stairs and ran up them. My heart was already racing from having to go down them in the first place. Then the loud bang, and now running up 2 flights of stairs. Once I was back at my desk, I sunk down in my chair, trying desperately to calm down. It was just one noise. I was in a building with doors that are locked. I kept saying it's over and over. Eventually, some relief come over me, until suddenly I got the feeling of being watched. I peeked up over my cubicle wall, looking around my office. Nothing seemed to be out of place. That was until I turned my face to the front of the building. Outside the first set of doors was a slender, tall, dirty male. He was cupping his hands around his eyes to try and see past the reflection of the lights. I dropped back down in my cubicle before he caught sight of me. He didn't look like anybody I'd ever seen at my office before. It's now past 9 AM. There is no good reason why he is checking out my office. As I sit in my chair, I hear the doors shake. I slowly stood up and watched him pull out the handles of the doors. They didn't budge, to my relief. But as I watched him, he turned his face to me. His face appears dirty and bruised. He then makes eye contact with me and begins slamming on the glass. I was so scared. It's the middle of the night. I was all by myself out in the middle of this building complex. I grabbed my headset and dialed 911. While getting the operator on the line, this guy was walking back and forth from one side of the glass to the other. I said what my name was and that I needed somebody to come out, that there's a guy trying to break in. I was so scared. While speaking with her, the guy disappears from view. I look in all directions, but I cannot see him. I knew that he would just walk off, but I didn't know where. But he obviously wasn't going, not with how hard he'd been banging on the door. Then out of nowhere, a good-sized rock come out of the middle of nowhere and smashes against the door. I screamed, went under my desk. The operator said to me what has happened. I explained that a rock smashed through the glass door. She then questions me if the glass is broken enough to let him in. I didn't want to stand and look, but she told me in order to know where he was, I had to. So I reluctantly crawl out from under my desk and just peek over the wall. I saw a huge crack down the first part of the door. Now, I immediately sit back down, telling the operator to hurry. She said they're on their way. It literally feels like you're standing there, stuck still, and there's nothing you can do. Help seems an eternity away. Then I hear another smash against the door, but along with the glass breaking sound, I now hear sirens coming towards the building. It's music to my ears, one and truly. I told the operator that the police had arrived and thanked her for all her support. I stand up, look over to the cubicle wall, seeing the red and blue lights flashing wildly. But the thing is, I didn't see where the guy was. Now the top part of the door is completely smashed. I can see that the rock is lying on the inside part of the entryway. One officer come in through the front door, and the others were coming out of the area. I could see their lights moving all around the parking lot. The first officer come in. He come to greet me. He was very patient. I then stood there for a while, explaining everything that happened. Soon, my boss arrived and checked on me. At some point, my husband was called, and I was told that I would be escorted home by one of the officers. I took the next few days off and started looking for another job, one where I'm not on my own. When I gave my statement, the officer explained that the person could be partnered with an ex-co-worker who was fired a few weeks prior for stealing and not showing up. He knew when people came and went. He knew when we kept the cell phones open and what ones we were selling. I went on to leave this job about a month later and started at a credit card machine company. It was an office full of people. Still a call center, but it felt a lot safer. Especially with security cameras all over the place. Like I said before, this company is no longer around. It was brought up by another company and basically liquidated all the funds that were worth something. I pray I never see that man again. When I was a young teenager, I had a commercial gig with my parents as a night shift worker. You know, the ones who come into your friendly neighborhood Chili's after the other guys close and really clean up the place. The restaurant was located in a fairly busy area of town, in a mini strip mall, so we weren't really concerned about security since there was always a patrolling night guard riding around the strip's parking lot, making sure there was no trouble. Well, on this particular night, it was myself and my mother cleaning one of our nightly buildings by ourselves, while my dad and sister were doing the other one across town. Everything was going extremely smoothly until my mum realizes that she's left our new box of Tide outside the truck. Me being unfazed by the aspect of being alone outside at 1 AM in the morning, choose to go and get it. When I'm locking the door to the truck, inching my way back inside, I notice this guy standing there, just staring at me by the parking lot. He wasn't moving or anything, just staring. It's creepy as hell, so I merely walk back inside, make sure the door's locked before continuing to do my business. I move out of the kitchen, into the front dining area, and begin mopping. That's when I noticed that the creepy dude was now standing beneath the front door awaiting outside, staring in at the glass looking at me. The dude practically screamed homeless with dirty clothes, long hair, a wild beard, and really freaky eyes. Beginning to be a bit freaked out, and not wanting to seem rude, I give him a quick glance before going back to my work, but before I could really do it, he started slowly and almost rhythmically pounding on the glass with his hand, staring directly at me. By this point, I was pretty much done with trying to be patient with him, promptly yelling at him. My mum heard me yelling from the kitchen, coming outside to see what all the commotion was. I then pointed at the man. The moment that I did, I saw my mum quickly back away. She then grabs my wrist and brings me back as well. I want to turn around to see what's up, but I barely have time. We reached the back of the stock room at the restaurant. We stayed there while my mum called the strip security guard to let him know what was up. Later that evening, after the security guard came and checked out the place, he said there was no sign of the other guy, but at the front door that led to the restaurant, there was a discarded razor lying in the middle of the pavement, and another one in the bushes at the place that he had been pounding on the glass. My mum then revealed to me that when she turned me away, he looked at her, given her this truly menacing grin, and lifted up the knife to the glass and began tapping at it. We never found out who he was or what he was planning to do with us. I was working night shift at a memory care unit. It's like a nursing home for people with dementia. The nurse's desk is in the centre of the unit, and north and south there are 250-yard hallways with resident rooms lining them. At night, things are slow, so the lights are shut off. The hallways have motion sensors on. In case a resident wakes up, the light pops on. There are 5 large fluorescent lights going down the corridor ceiling. Sitting at the desk minding my own business when, all of a sudden, at the end, the furthest light comes on. I wait for a resident to come out of their room, but nothing. For a few seconds, I'm waiting until the closest light blinks on. Weirded out, I wait a bit. The third one pops on, as though somebody's coming towards me. The fourth blinks on, then the fifth light. My whole body is froze with terror, and then, boom, they all click off. To this day, I've never been so scared in my life. Something was moving slowly down the hallway, but I couldn't see it, but the sensors could. None of the lights should have went off in perfect timing. I will never forget the feeling. Just plain horror. I worked night shifts with a serial killer. She is a nurse, had killed 8 people since 2007. She was convicted 2 months after my last shift with her. Now I work for a private home care company that was outsourced to long-term care homes. I worked with Elizabeth at Telfer Place. She had a lot of cooped-up anger towards residents, and would pick them based upon aggression and how manageable they were. The lady assaulted at tenor was hit her, and screamed bloody murder if you tried to provide any care. She used insulin as a weapon, because it's a silent killer if given in large enough doses, and has fairly hard to detect properties if the resident already has problems. She was a really weird lady, and pretty useless as a care provider. She wouldn't do any heavy lifting or anything. I hated her because of that. Most shifts I worked with, it was just the 2 of us at nights. When we worked together, she would follow me around and talk. I didn't really listen to her, which I kind of regret, because it would have really provided some insight into her mind. She said weird stuff about wanting to inbreed animals. I wish I had more information on her, but knowing who she was and what she was capable of is truly terrifying. I was camping in a valley by myself, with no cell service. I stayed late on the trail and ran into a nice local dude as it's getting dark. He showed me a local camping spot close to the road and riverbed, but camouflaged. I had a fire, drank beer, listened to one of my friend's comedy podcasts. I was loud and visible. Because it is really dark, I decided to sleep in the back of my truck, under my trooper, next to all of my gear, as opposed to setting up the tent. Now the next morning, I made a fire, cracked a beer, and started making breakfast. Then I noticed that there's a man at the edge of my camp. He comes closer, but never looks directly at me. The dude looks like he's homeless, has a long ratty beard, and at least 100 plastic bags all tied across his clothes. I comment how nice the day is. No response from him. I offer breakfast. Nothing. He sort of paces around the perimeter of my camp. I offer him a beer, but he just turns around. Now he's just standing there, staring off with his back to me, wandering around. I'm realizing that nothing good's gonna happen from this. I had my bear spray and buck knife. I give him the ultimatum. You either go away or I'm gonna make you. He ignores me. I grab the bear mace and take a few steps towards him. He now sulks away. I threw my stuff in the truck and left that place immediately. I wondered how long he'd been watching me there during the night, or what he wanted. I don't know how he got himself out there, all by himself with seemingly no equipment. I mean, we're really in the middle of nowhere here, but yet, he seems fine. My wife and I were camping alone, in a kind of remote area, but there were little campsites made by the park's depths that were flat and clear. We found a great looking spot, but it was right on a lake, which I thought was to be avoided. But we were beginner backpackers, and figured the park's depth wouldn't make a spot there if it wasn't safe. So we set up camp mid-afternoon. I was feeling a little beat, so took a short nap, while my wife read a book. When I woke up, she told me that somebody was walking around in our campsite. I looked around, but didn't see anything. There were some other campsites maybe 500 feet away, so I figure it's another camper checking out the place. Late that night, after we'd gone to bed for the night, it was drizzling a little rain, and I was sort of half asleep at probably 2 or 3 a.m. Then I realized that if I listened really close, I could hear somebody walking around our campsite very quietly. I didn't have a knife or any kind of weapon, so I was freaking out. I then carefully woke my wife up to get her ready. We now listened together. Then we suddenly hear it. It sounded like a cat clearing itself. Then, more walking in a circle around the tent. Then the sound of a large cat lapping up water just feet from our tent. Then walking back to the tent immediately beside us. I heard it flop down on the ground. Cat owners know how a relaxed cat flops over, but it was way bigger. I was trying to control my breathing, as I didn't want it to hear me panicking so hard. It hung around for a long time. I really had to pee, but I wasn't ready to move. Now the scariest part is that this whole time, it was so quiet that if you didn't concentrate, you'd be sure that it wasn't even there. It did eventually leave, but I couldn't have been sure. It may have left way before or after I thought it did. Eventually, I was sure I hadn't heard it in a long time, so I poked my head out, didn't see anything, and went back to bed. The next morning, there are massive paw prints in our campsite, just like cat's paws, but more like 8 inches across. Later, after getting home, I called the park ranger to let them know what had happened. They told me that it was a mountain lion, and how lucky I was to actually have survived. I live in a very small town, where that I once worked from my laptop. Like, the population is 200 small. I was in a small cabin in the woods, next to the highway. One day, I was walking my dog, and I heard 2 gunshots somewhere nearby. I didn't think much of it. It's a hunting area, and stuff like this can happen all the time. It's kind of redneck. The following day, a truck pulls up. I don't even know anyone in this town, so it's weird. And I'm put off. The guy calls me over, saying he's my neighbour, asking if I too heard the shots. I said yeah. He claims it was his neighbour taking pot shots at his home over a land dispute. Don't ask me to be a witness for him or anything, just if I heard it. Okay, seems really odd to me. Never met this guy before, and when I say neighbour, I mean a kilometre out of sight. The guy sees my dog digging somewhere. It's not important. Suddenly, he yells at her to not do that. Gets out and says that she's iffy. She stares at him. I call her over. I want him to see that my dog's not a threat, but he grabs her. She really didn't like it and started yelping. I'm like, dude, stop. He says to me whether I own any guns myself. I say no. She's a great dog trainer. He asked me to go over now and mow his lawn, and please bring my dog. In the strangest way, just like that. Please ensure that you bring, and my dog's name. I can't explain it. His mannerisms, the way he acted, the way he spoke, everything was just off. He leaves there soon after, and I'm thinking, God, I just told this guy that not only did I hear the gunshots, that I'm unarmed as well. How do I even know it was the neighbour like he claimed to be, and not in fact this weird dude who shot at someone's home, and trying to see who might be a witness? I wouldn't go to his home, not a chance in hell. It's a horrible feeling. Then, he kept showing up and asking why, calling and texting me. I gave him my number hoping he'd stop, but he didn't. He was really adamant that I got over to him. Turns out, the guy's totally crazy. He lost everything. In a very dangerous mental state. Nothing to lose. The small store owners in town explained the guy to me. Apparently, he's the most hated in the entire valley. Really bad reputation. Now I'm really freaking out. I found it very hard to sleep after that. Cabin in the woods, nobody nearby that would hear any commotion. So many places to hide. Just bear spray and a knife. And the guy knows that I have no guns. I would be kept up for hours listening at night for any movement outside. It is dead silence here. One night, in the middle of the night, my dog begins to growl, then growl more. I don't hear anything. It doesn't matter. Every room in that cabin had a window, but the bathroom. I get up, grab the knife and my bear spray, and lock myself in the bathroom for hours just listening. I eventually fell asleep in there. I don't think I've ever felt that kind of dread before. I just pictured this lunatic sneaking up with a shotgun to wipe me out. I was sure that he was going to get me for listening to him murder someone a few days earlier. God, it's just awful. I moved, but the new landlords were equally creepy and even started trying to steal my dog, even though they had 3 literally. I heard them discussing it, how they had to make themselves the in crowd. They actually began hand feeding their dogs, as well as mine when I wasn't looking. They were really creepy. They went to a market one morning. I packed all my stuff into my uninsured van with no license, my pup, and bailed that town and never looked back again. Good God, it was Hills Must Have Eyes stuff that was happening there. I'm sure something would have happened if I remained in that cabin any longer. My girlfriend and I were doing an overnight hike on the North Country Trail, and after hiking some amount of miles, we decided to hang up our hammocks and rest. We were hanging out about 30 feet off the trail, just snoozing a little, when I heard a sound. I sat up in the hammock and saw there was a massive coyote about 10 feet away. We locked eyes, but it took off. At the same time, something that sounded far bigger took off from the other side of us. We packed up our hammocks and kept going. About 5 minutes down the trail, we came up to a black bear cub and scared it off by accident, and it took off to its mother. I was out walking around the bush, hunting for upland birds. I walked through a bit of a valley as a shortcut to get to another area, where I come across a guy standing on the trail with an AR-15 at the ready position. Instantly, the hairs on the back of my neck stood up, instinctively knowing that this was not the place to be. Trying my best to stay calm, I said, "Hey, I'm just out here bird hunting. How are you?" "Fine. I'm hunting deer." Now, deer season wasn't open. AR-15s are not legal for deer. He was not dressed for hunting. As a matter of fact, he appeared homeless, like he hadn't changed clothes or bathed for days. Think of the scariest 50-year-old meth addict you can think of. Give him an AR-15. You're probably close. Do you know the best way for me to go to find some birds? Well, I imagine you might find some the way you come down. Go back. His voice got noticeably sharper, in a way that he obviously wanted me to get out of there now and not bug him. I didn't even question him. I turned right around and got the hell out of there. I live in a rural town, surrounded by mountains and forest, so camping is almost a weekly event, even in winter. The one I can't shake though is when me and my friends broke off from our group of olders to go to a better fishing spot about a mile away. We only brought one tent for the group, so we built a lean-to against a larger boulder in a clearing. I couldn't sleep. I had the feeling that somebody was watching us. I assumed it's a mountain lion, which isn't too big of a deal considering their behaviour, so I throw some more logs onto the fire. I then looked up from it, under a light full of moonlit surroundings. There's a man standing at the edge of the clearing about 80 yards away. I was completely frozen. I could not take my eyes off him. He now stared back. He walked off in the opposite direction after about a minute or two. I doubt he had any ill intentions, but I never know. I sat there holding my friend's 357 the entire night. I was canoe camping with a friend in Michigan, camping at a fire trail. We saw some guys in a jeep and Amish in a wagon, but nothing after dark. We were near the riverbank, and there was a high area with the remnants of a fire, so we thought people would come by later. Around midnight, I hear a car coming down the fire lane towards us, stopping, backing up, going forward, backing up, pulling forward, and backing up again. This goes on for like 5 minutes at a time, and they kept on getting closer. Eventually, they're at the area right above us, doing this weird driving thing. I can see them shining lights. My friend is still asleep. I try to shake her leg and wake her up. They then drive down the riverbank, doing the same weird thing, until they're facing our tent, shining their headlights and torches at us. I really didn't want to confront them, as we're two girls alone without weapons, but I leaned over my passed out friend and opened the tent. It's some guys in a pickup. They see me and continued backing up, then pulling forward, and continued this thing all the way out of sight. The whole time, pulling forward, backing up, then going forward. I have no idea what was wrong with them, or what they're doing out there in the middle of nowhere to this day. When I was younger, around 14 or 15 years old, my family used to camp at a state park. Every night, my friend and I would walk through the woods. We called this a ritual. This particular night, we decided to walk further into the woods than usual. Now we had flashlights, but we'd rather navigate the woods without them. So we're about half a mile from the nearest campsite when we hear a whispering behind us. Obviously, we hit the flashlights and spun around, but didn't see anything. So we kept walking, and we hear it again. This time, we stop and look around a bit, and decided to head back to our campsite. That's when we're finally able to see what the whispering was. It's a lady crawling on the ground, just whispering random words. She was wearing dark clothes, covered in dirt. When she notices us, she stands up, declares that she's looking for our campsite. We ended up walking her back to the campground and tried helping her find the group. Turns out, she was really out of it. Her friends didn't even notice she was missing, and she doesn't remember any of it. We drove across the country to go to Glacier National Park, and mid-drive, it caught on fire. We got there, and they directed us to the west side of the park, because it was still open. We spent the night there as well. In the morning, we decided to do a little hiking and swim in a lake. It was beautiful, but ash was falling like snow. It should have been alarming, but there's others around, well, at least for a while, and we figured that if it was something serious, somebody would have told us. After swimming, we decided to go down a little town we saw because they had a laundromat. We thought that we could give ourselves some clean clothes there and a lunch or something. So we packed up the car and tent and drove down. At this point, there's a flurry of activity and our car was stopped, and they were checking this to mark us off. Because the park had been evacuated and we're missing, the fire had turned extremely close. Like so close we drove down and we could see the flames. We never really comprehended fully how bad of a situation we got ourselves into. And it was all because I was annoyed that one guy on the trip only kept on wearing one pair of shorts, and the other's clothes had claimed they were dirty, but the shorts weren't that bad. We probably would have died if that hadn't have happened. We went on a group camping trip in the middle of nowhere in Arizona, only to wake up to hear something sniffing the outside of our tent. My immediate reaction is that it's probably a bear or some animal that come across our sight, and just maybe my idiot friends didn't tie up their garbage. Seconds later, I can hear the animal or whatever it is go to the next tent over. Everybody in mine grabs one another quietly to acknowledge that we're all awake, aware of what's happening. Moments later, a friend in another tent popped out to scream and make noise. He had a handgun too, hoping it'd scare the animal off. Turns out, it was a guy who was absolutely off his mind. He decided to sniff our tents, going through the coolers looking for food. Our friend chased him off. We immediately packed up and left. A year after the incident, my idiot friends and I went back to the same area, thinking what we encountered was a one-time incident. This time, we thought we'd all outsmart any possible creepers. Instead of camping in tents, we all slept in the bed of our trucks and SUVs. 'Cause you know, they can't possibly sniff a Toyota. It's the middle of the night. I'm passed out in the back of my SUV when suddenly, I feel a light on my face. Naturally, I wake up, cast them out and said what are they doing, thinking it's my friends. However, I instantly realised that I should pretend to be asleep and not let the individual know that I was fully awake. I lay there next to my girlfriend, hoping she would do the same as I kept an ear out for any weird sounds like sniffing. After the light left my car, I can hear the person walk to the next truck, shine his light on my friend's face in there. I slowly look up, and I see that there's just some older guy staring there, looking at everybody while they slept. I waited until we left the campsite, busted out of my truck, woke up everyone, and got the hell out of there.